appeared since these persistent jet contrails. I don't know if there's any studies that have actually been done on that. I would imagine, though, a lot of these pollutants would contribute to, at the very least, lung disorders, because we are going to inhale some of this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. The jets are highly polluting. It's really awful, the amount of emissions that they put out. We're really not talking about doing anything about them. So you have asthma, you have, in other words, crop damage, you have short-term memory loss. All of these things can be associated with jet fuel emissions.
Rosalind, you at one time worked for the USDA in California as a crop loss adjuster. Did you notice at that time that perhaps this was a contributing cause?
I was working during the late 1980s and into the 1995-96. And we didn't see anything that I would attribute we saw more weather-related problems with crop losses, but we didn't see the burning and the crisping of the leaves like we do now. We didn't see the high UV radiation levels because I went back and took a look. We didn't have high UV radiation levels like we do now into the 11s, which is in the extreme area. In many areas, sometimes in Florida, you were up to 11 or 12 in the reading, which is at the extreme end of the ultraviolet radiation levels. And we don't see the infrared is much higher. So that means that when you're out in the sun, you feel the heat and the intensity of the sun almost like it's cooking your skin. And we're seeing much more of that than ever before. And that's we had a week of that here recently in California, and it started turning the grapes to raisins. It got so hot, and the intensity of the UV radiation and the infrared was just awful.
Yet at the same time, it's supposedly putting up some kind of shield or block to filter the sunlight coming through?
Well, here's the problem. In order to increase crop production, you need direct sunlight. In order to get rid of molds and mildews and funguses and flu viruses and different things, one needs direct sunlight reaching the earth. It acts as a disinfectant. And the studies that I've been looking at and the researchers that I've been looking at say that if you begin to put something up that acts as a shield or cloud cover, then you're going to have less direct sunlight reaching the earth, and your crop production will be, a side effect is crop production will be reduced. There's a corn crop study at University of Illinois which shows that if you have normal rainfall where you have increased cloud cover, your crop production in corn drops dramatically the more the cloud cover is there. And if we don't get direct sunlight, which is happening now a lot because of this man-made cloud cover, you're beginning to see higher increases in rickets in children from lack of vitamin D. That's a bone disease. There's a link between not enough vitamin D and breast cancer in women now that's coming out. The CDC and University of California, Berkeley, and Kaiser Permanente, and Kaiser's a health group, all are coming out now and showing studies that rickets are increasing in the United States in many areas, and that this increased cloud cover is one aspect of that increase, and so we're having less vitamin D, which also can lead to more health effects in children. So one of the things you don't want to do is stop direct sunlight from reaching the earth, because then flu pandemics could escalate because you have no direct sunlight hitting the earth. And that's why people are not sick so much in the summertime when there's more sunlight, and tend to have more health problems and colds and flu in the winter when you have a moist condition.
Rosalind, you were a keynote speaker in 2007 at the United Nations. What were the topics that you discussed there?
I talked about agriculture and man-made cloud cover. I did talk about the persistent jet contrails. I did discuss experimental weather modification programs and how anyone can modify your weather without your consent. I did talk about the impact of changing our climate on the microclimates from agriculture. And in every area of the United States, there's different climates which allow certain foods and grasses and trees to grow. And when you begin to have multiple weather modification programs and atmospheric programs, that can change these microclimates and cause crop failures in those areas.
How was your talk received? I mean, was there a lot of interest?
Oh, there was a lot of interest, and I still am receiving inquiries about that. There was a tremendous amount of interest worldwide because a lot of people in other countries as well as in the United States itself didn't know that we were modifying the weather on such a grand scale. They had thought that persistent jet contrails were really benign, and they didn't realize that water vapor was a greenhouse gas. So that when someone said, well, the contrails are made of ice crystals and water vapor, they didn't realize that this could exacerbate global warming. So this was, some did know, but a lot of the people that I spoke with at both of the presentations I gave at the United Nations really did not know much about this, and so it was kind of a revelation for them to look up and realize that what we're seeing in the skies are not necessarily benign.
Apart from Dennis Kucinich, who I'm aware of, Congressman Kucinich, who I believe tried to introduce a bill or investigation into this a few years ago, have any other members of Congress in this country shown an interest?
I don't think so, not that I know of. And the reason is because the early format of people talking about the jets and what they were seeing came out in the form of the word chemtrail. And it was never defined by any government agency. And the Air Force quite nicely, along with NOAA and NASA and all these other government agencies and the universities, came out and said, oh, that's normal, and what you're seeing is normal, and they attached the word conspiracy theory and hoax to it on their websites and in their writings. And so no elected official, even to this day, some are still having trouble that if you talk about the jets, they run the other way because they think you want to talk about a hoax or a conspiracy theory. And it is just in the last couple of years where I have made sure I have stayed away from the word chemtrail, but I've really talked about what the health effects are from what we're seeing and began to talk about the NASA studies in man-made clouds, began to talk about the Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, their book, Aviation and the Global Atmosphere, which also talks about these programs. So there's a whole series of things, and we're getting more traction all the time. But even now, in the energy bill that is up to be voted upon by the U.S. Senate any day now, what we're seeing is they're only talking about controlling carbon dioxide. They're not talking about controlling the jets and jet fuel emissions or the jet contrails they produce, or they're not talking about flying them at different heights, which would reduce the number, which could stop exacerbating global warming so badly. And they don't talk about any of the other greenhouse gases that they're going to be restricting. So the bill is quite limited to a very small focus.
It's, listening to you, it's sort of ironic. We have this big pomp and ceremony about how we're reducing emissions and industry is going to be forced to reduce emissions, and yet we're flying up in the skies pumping the poisons out sort of from above. And I think, obviously, as you've mentioned, most people are not really aware of it. How connected are these weather modification programs to the HARP facility in Alaska?
Some of them are not connected at all. Some of them are done by states and counties and private individuals because anyone can modify your weather at this particular juncture in time. A university can. The military can modify your weather. There's no restriction on any type of atmospheric weather modification at this time. HARP may have an effect on the jet stream, and it may be able to create heating or perturb the atmosphere to create storm fronts that go across the United States. That's quite a possibility, but I'm not an expert at HARP.